Chapter 6. My walk home from St. Anthony's Upper School often took me past dandelions, and some days I would think about the time my mother first taught me about dandelion. As I recall it, we were sitting in our backyard, itchy legs in the grass, tingling faces in the breeze. Wayne was sitting a few feet away, peering at something on the ground. I must have been about 8 years old then. Wayne just out of diapers. My mother pointed at a yellow flower. Dandelion. Dandelion. The teeth of the lion. It's the leaves they are talking about. You see? You can eat them, you know. She showed me. I shook my head and made a face. She laughed and pointed from the yellow flower to a furry white globe next to it. The sun becomes the moon, she said, humming with the song of it. She wrangled the stem, plucked the moon, and the moon becomes the stars. She blew, sending the seeds in a galactic shower. She laughed. I laughed. Wayne crouched over his mystery. The day squatted lazy above. The air was airy, with the insects and the fizzing pylons. Grass always marred my mother's legs, green stains nestling into red marks where the blaze beat into her pale skin. Those marks, like the wrinkles in her face, always made skin itself seem like a stretchy fabric one might wrap and unwrap with ease. I was thinking about this the day my father decided to leave us. I was 16, walking home from school alone. My backpack was creaking and sweaty against one side of my back. My father had told me to wear it on both shoulders to protect my spine. There had been PTA meetings about this. But we upper schoolers knew the diagonal sling conveyed unnecessary nonchalance. The backpack rocked against my shoulder, and yellow eyes winked from neglected lawns, and I remember my mother's lesson about entropy among the weeds, the dusty bitterness of the plants, serrated leaves. We use our teeth on lion's teeth. Only when I got home from school and found the kitchen clean and sunlit and my mother missing did I realize what day it was. How uncanny that I had been bringing to mind bits of green stuck in our teeth and Wayne's small back across the yard. I stalled, going down into the den, where I knew my mother was awaiting us. I toasted a slice of white bread and slathered cream cheese over it, then leaned against the counter to eat it. My father came into the kitchen and we traded nods. He plucked a ginger beer from the fridge, twisted it open, took a swig, put it on the counter. There was a shared sense of preparing to endure. We both disdained this family ritual. I don't know what he thought exactly, but personally, I prided myself on my own memories of my brother, which I kept present to myself willfully, sliding them along as if on a abacus before falling asleep each night. A trip to the mall to buy a birthday card for Mom. Trotting barefoot over the road to catch the ice cream crowd wincing and giggling, raking leaves, tossing snowballs, splashing in puddles. My father picked up his bottle from the counter with resolve. We made our way downstairs together like we were in the dark. I descending before him, he with a hand on my shoulder. In the den, the TV was frozen in a zigzaggy blur that looked like it should have made a tearing sound. The air was thick with the spooks of microwaved food, TV static, stirred up carpet dust. There were bowls of peanuts and Chex Mix on the coffee table. My mother was sitting in the middle of the couch, gripping the remote control like the railing on the edge of a cliff. My father and I sat on either side of her. We did not have a choice. My father, rebellious, chugged his ginger beer. I slipped off my shoes and pulled my knees to my chest, raising my cheese in the chink between them. My mother aimed the remote at the TV, and the zigzag calmed the clarity like wind dying down on the surface of water. On the screen, Wayne was dressed in dapper, plump cargo shorts and a blue polo shirt. He ran around in a circle. The picture nodded up and down. It was a bright day, the image receding into a white blur whenever the camera tilted up too far. The couch's joints cracked as the three of us leaned forward. We always watch these videos as if something were going to happen, as if this were an actual story, with events and a climax. It was possible. We owned hours and hours of these home videos and hadn't yet seen them all. Whenever Wayne's birthday came around, my mother carefully chose from stacks of labeled dated camcorder tapes, then went to the art studio at Cartersville to transfer them to video. Last year, I had spied on her process. I'd sat at the top of the staircase to the den, trying not to knock down any of the framed family portraits that descended the wall alongside the stairs. I had peered through the railing at my mother, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, staring fixedly at the camcorder cradled in her arms. From my perch, I had not been able to see the screen, only my mother's face and the camcorder tapes. Small black screen, only my mother's face. Rectangles congregating on the carpet around her. I remember thinking that there were enough of them to build a transformer the size of Wayne's body when he died. That was the Wayne I saw when I counted my hibiscus head of memories. The 7-year-old still out, limbs grown just out of his control. Not this sturdy toddler trotting through brightness, except that today, oddly enough, I had happened to remember him around this age, a toddler in our backyard, but this was not Pikesville. Where is this anyway? My mother's silence chastised me for not knowing. California, my father finally said. Grandma Roses? I asked, leaning back to ask him behind my mother's hunched form. Yeah, he said. You and me must have stayed here on that visit, I am thinking. The tartness in the air meant that this had been one of the bad times. One of those times my mother had up and left, dragging one of us kids with her. My mother began to cry quietly, her brow gathering its pleats. On the TV, Wayne was doing a dance, stomping his foot and turning around, his eyes downcast. He spun in a circle and kicked and mewed through the fluttered wind. These thin streaks flew across the screen, spiraled, vanished, my mother's hair blowing into the frame. What you're doing there, Wayne? The camera asked in a high-pitched sing-song. There in California, Baby Wayne called out a reply to her. It wasn't a word, but the camera said, oh, of course. Wayne walked around, looking at the ground. He kicked, trying to fling something off his foot. What was he doing? An ambulance siren went past in the background of the video, and the camera veered instinctively. Fingers propelled into view. My mother waving at something. The camera zoomed in on Wayne, then jerkily zoomed out again. He was sitting on the sidewalk now, smacking his palms on the dark splotch in front of him. You got it now, Wayne? You caught your shadow. He grinned up at us, the video cut. It resumed under dimmer light, evening or morning, a time of day that thinks of sun. The camera was careening around a house that I now recognize as Grandma Rose's. I had visited her home in San Francisco many times, but seeing it on screen was like being sure you know a song as the radio, but getting the lyrics wrong when you try to sing along. Wayne sat on a rug, his joints warped in a stripped onesie, his fingers and cheeks strung with saliva. There was a stark white animal skull on the wall above him, a Joshua Tree souvenir from which Grandma Rose swore a horde of red ants had once poured. The camera panned across a framed black and white film poster, La Jetée, and through a doorway where it landed on an uncooked chicken, sallow and majestic, freckled with pepper, then bounced to Grandma Rose. Her happy, tired face filled the screen, her voice conversational, silver bracelets chiming as she reached up to smooth the gravy with wisps off her brow. The camera settled with a chunk onto the counter. Still running, the world fell into order. Grandma Rose was stirring something on the stove, her hip cocked. She wore a black turtleneck, black cigarette pants, a white belt, almost parodically French, even though she had lived in the States for over 20 years by then. My mother, surprisingly chubby, in daisy pajamas, post-pregnancy waist, I realize now, crossed the camera's still eyes, her ponytail twitching on her back, weighing on her hip. She sat on a stool and pulled him onto her lap. All you could see was her leg, his arm, and their very different profiles. I glanced at my mother leaning forward on the couch beside me. She had abandoned her crying the way a child does, sheer distraction cutting it short so fast that her cheeks were still wet with tears. My father caught my eye behind her back and shrugged. The annual Wayne video was usually a baby book page on screen, scenes of him waving or eating or playing or doing magic tricks, with that recessed focus in his eyes as he made things come and go. One time, there had been new footage from his last day, and my mother had done a voiceover narrating all the leads in the case that still needed to be pursued. And another time, there had been a theme my father and I could not guess, and my mother's face had congealed into a disappointment that lasted for days. But in this video montage, Wayne seemed almost incidental, as if to affirm this impression. My mother now pointed the remote at the TV and raised the volume on the conversation in that California kitchen. Grandma Rose was demurring. It's not a problem. You stay here as long as you need to, Sherry. He says it's the last. Of course he says that, Sherry. But you don't even know how many times. Grandma Rose cast a look over her shoulder, an eyebrow raised, and turned back to the stove, steam scrolling up behind her. The look and the move were beautiful. I have lost hours of my life to gazing at the one family portrait where Grandma Rose appears, which hung toward the bottom of the wall along the den staircase. She looks like a Hollywood starlet, the rest of us like Muppets. My father spoke up in the den. "Sha," he said, "what's going on?" I looked at my mother, who was ignoring us both with an intensity that seemed to have a tremor of laughter in it. The way heat ripples the air, the very fact that we did not know what was coming, was precisely her point. She was the only one in this family who ever paid attention to anything. She was the one who had arranged the family portraits along the stairs, alternating the white relatives and the black ones. Lockett's, then Williams's, then Lockett's. She was the one who had recorded these videos and now compiled them into an elegy every year. My father and I watched her, frightened by how much we owed her. On the screen, she began speaking one long sentence, making a confession that stopped Grandma Rose's staring arm and turned her by degrees until her pretty face, writhen with age and concern, took up the background of the shot. There had been an affair years before with another man, and my mother was considering telling my father to take revenge on him for his own misdeeds. The sound went in and out, but the words were clear enough. As they took on weight and meaning, my father gripped the arm of the couch with one hand, then gripped my mother's arm with the other, then finally let go of both and stood and went upstairs. I was only 16, too young to hear this broken grown-up talk. It was the first I'd ever heard of these liaisons, as Grandma Rose was referring to them. But I stayed. I watched. I saw it through. I thought about what it would be like to tell my latest therapist about how this would shift the weight of trustworthiness in our balance sheet. It almost felt as if there would be a scene at the end of the tape revealing the face of this other man my mother was talking about, but there was only Grandma Rose on the screen, shaking her head profoundly, then a narrowing to black. My mother, here in the den, had turned off the TV. She looked at me blankly, as if only now realizing that I was there and that I had heard everything. But the worry in her face soon dissolved. She picked up the barely touched snacks and marched up the stairs at a clip, the balls rattling like maracas, the family portrait on the wall staring beside her. I heard a door upstairs shut. I knew my parents would start fighting and waited to hear their raised voices. But then they didn't, which was worse. The mama above intimated something different from the disappearing quick of their usual arguments. I switched the TV back on. All afternoon, all evening, I lay on the couch, wrapped inside a quilt of sitcoms, the same commercials, switching them together. A convenience store in Brooklyn, or a notion of Brooklyn, pastiched from iconic scenes and broad stereotypes. The bell on the glass door chimes. The linoleum is scratched and bruised. The aisles are crowded with brightly colored boxes, brand names crying out, familiar and illegible. The counter is a window, so compressed by the shelves of goods around it, there is barely a gap through which to exchange words, glances, banter, and barter. At first, no one is there to sell the packet of gum, with its languid pink packaging. Then a head pops up from below. What was he looking for? Like he's a jack in the box. How can I help you see? My name is out of his mouth before I recognize that it's him. It's Wayne. He grins, wide, flaunting a gap in his teeth. He is 7 years old. His chin barely reaches above the counter. You are alive? He tilts his head and salutes me. Been here in Brooklyn the whole time. But you died. How have you been seen? He is a man now, my father's height, his voice gravely. He reaches through the gap toward me over the counter. His hand grips my throat. And I am alone, nap drool, waiting the weave of the shambly couch in the den. The television ching quietly. blinking at a human pace, a phone number strolling under a white woman gesturing and gibbering widely, seeming at once ecstatic and afraid. I touched my hand to my collarbone, felt a quick joy. He is in Brooklyn. Then a grip of pain. No, he is not. Aching behind the bridge of my nose, I made my way up to the den stairs, pausing at the portrait at the top of a charcoal sketch of Wayne, age 9. Everyone said it was good that my mother was working on her art again, even if Wayne had become her only subject. Endless reproductions of photos and camcorder freeze frames. But I found this one grotesque, that title. Wayne had died when he was 7. This hypothetical portrait, this unfamiliar face, was another way his death has killed us all apart. The way a missing tooth grows gaps between the others. Our memories of him now conflicted in dire ways. My mother had hung this bad, wrong portrait, had even used it for vigil publicity materials. I glared at the prophesied face, even already outdated, then made my way up to my bedroom. I skipped brushing my teeth. I skipped pajamas. I turned off the light and crept fully clothed under the covers. After a few minutes, there was a knock at my bedroom door. "Come in," I said. My father came in and closed the door. My bed whizzed as he sat down, his hip crushing my toe. We readjusted, trading sorries. He hadn't tucked me in for ages. I knew he was there not because I needed him, but because he needed to be away from my mother. We followed a silent script in which he reassured me, and we were both reassured. But when he put his hand on my covered foot as preface to parting, all of a sudden, I did need him. "How did you and Mom meet?" I asked. My father did not say anything. My mother had told me and Wayne this story 1,000, a million times, sometimes revealing new details, inserting jokes and reflection, but sticking to the same plot. I knew that plot by heart. It had been a bedtime favorite as long as I could recall, all the way back to the days when we still called her Mama. My question to my father had been prompted in part by habit, my sleepiness, the extra weight grounding my bed, its shifting warmth. He had never told us this story himself, and I felt foolish for asking about it tonight, of all nights. But then, as if a latch that hadn't been properly closed had clicked open, he spoke. "Well," he said, "we were on the same flight." I exhaled and bundled down. It was the same story. His words a bit different. I was headed out to finish up at school. She was going home for the summer holiday. Soon, as I sat next to her, I noticed she was pretty. But this might be hard for you to understand. You could not just notice a pretty white girl back then. "Oh," I said, "you mean like?" Yes, it was really like that. I mean, there were white girls at school. It was the 70s. Things had changed, were changing. But we were all still separated out. You know, no signs or anything. People just keeping to themselves. Airplanes were complicated. You never knew who was gonna sit next to you. But she was friendly to me, which made it worse, in a way, you know. This part of the story wasn't familiar. My mother hadn't said any of this. I nodded, so he'd go on. I'd only flown a couple of times before. I was straight up terrified. He chuckled. Your mother was a real regular. I wouldn't have been surprised if she knew the pilot personally. She just rattled on and on. You know how she gets. We laughed, but it died quietly. Anyhow, she could tell how scared I was, and she talked me through it. Helped me out with my seatbelt. They got all tangled up, our seatbelts. That made me even more nervous, but she just rattled on through it. The other folks around us looked pretty peevish, but once we took off, the engines drowned us out and they turned away, and I relaxed a bit. I remember her hair smelled like cigarettes and perfume. I know it now. Red jaw. She was dressed like a hippie, but still proper. Light blue dress, sandals. He paused. She had real gold on her fingers and in her ears. My granddaddy taught me how to tell the difference in the shine. Anyhow, most times I'd have begged for a piece of quiet, but it helped. All that chatter distracted me from thinking about this metal can getting tossed across the sky. She told me near about anything that came to mind, seemed like. I knew what was coming next, and I smiled for the comfort of it. Why was I so nervous? She asked me. Church mostly, so we talked about her end of days and my end of days. She asked me what I would do if it was the end of days now. Maybe not the best thing to bring up on a flight, but again, somehow it helped. I said, I think of my mama. She laughed. So I said, okay, I'd say a prayer. She laughed even harder. Then she said this thing. Crazy as all get out to say to a stranger. She just met. She said, if I were about to die, I'd find the closest man around. I silently mouthed the next words along with him, and I would plant one on him. His laugh mocked him on my bed, which clacked agreeably. That was some crazy talk to say to a stranger, especially a brother. Anyhow, then we hit some rocky air. Man, I got beat with the nerves. Real bad. I was huffing. My asthma was worse back then. And your mom? She was just a young woman, she said. All right, it's gonna be all right. I didn't believe her, but then she reached over, and as she held my hand, I frowned and sat up. Come on, Dad. You can say it. Mama already told us the real story. What real story? Behind the smile in his voice, he sounded surprised, put out even. How the turbulence got to us, and the plane was all teeter-tottering. My mother's words were coming out of me now. I didn't have any other language for it. And you were so scared that she leaned over and planted a kiss on you, smack dab on the mouth. My father was quiet. I couldn't quite see his face. Something creaked, a footstep in the hall. The birch outside my window. You thought it was end of days, I explained patiently, right? You thought? Yes, we did. We surely did, he finally said, his voice punched low. But it wasn't. I pressed on, my ass straining to make out his in the dark. It wasn't the end, I said, finishing the story the way my mother always had. It was the beginning. After a moment, I heard a tiny snap, a gentle knock. I didn't know it then, but my father had left his Seiko watch on my bedside table. He kissed my forehead. We traded good nights. He shut the door behind himself. I lay in the dark, counting my beads, sliding them along the abacus of my mind, thinking of the gaps between people and between memories. How everything we do is a leap across them. Time began to slip forward, fast, faster, then at a furious speed, propelling me through the night until my eyelids flipped open to a stopped down with no color at all.